everybody. Aloha nui loa. Welcome from the big island of Hawaii. Eat your heart out. Just kidding. I'm on vacation over here. And welcome to the 40th edition of the Rare Book Cafe, the coffee break edition. Nothing like a little bit of Kona Gold. With my co-host, Lynn from Ridge Books in Calhoun, Georgia. Hello, Lee.
Hello, Ed. This is totally unfair.
I know. While you're shivering in your socks, I'm sweltering
right.
in
It
my...
was 13 at 8 o'clock this morning. It's up to 20 now. And yes, it's been very cold. And my coffee is, a Keurig cup, not Kona. So it's just unfair.
Well, this cup happened to come with the timeshare, so I'm drinking it.
Oh, well.
And our guest this week, Sean Lynch from Books for You, York, South Carolina. Hello, Sean.
Hey, guys. How are y'all today? Obviously, Ed, you're doing awesome.
I'm always doing awesome.
Yeah.
I had to break out my bathing suit because it was 17 degrees here. So a little warmer than Lee's weather down there in Georgia.
Brrr. Sean, so the reason why we're having you on the show this week is you are going to be an exhibitor at the upcoming Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. And folks, the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair is one of the primary sponsors of this show. And we want to make sure they get their money's worth. And so for the next couple of shows, we're going to be interviewing guests such as yourself, who are either going to be attending the show as dealers or as buyers. So if you're looking for a good place to get your money's worth in advertising, this is it. Sign on to the Rare Book Cafe and become one of our sponsors. All right, enough for the paid political announcement.
Well,
Sean, tell us a little bit about your bookstore, Books for You.
Sure. Books for You. We call ourselves a rare, used, and vintage bookshop here in York, South Carolina. We do have a number of rare books in the store, but we also sell just plain old reading copies and collectible editions that don't necessarily have to break the bank. We have rare paperbacks. In terms of genre, we're kind of all over the board. A lot of nonfiction, a lot of fiction, classic literature, signed copies, and we have an online presence too. And we also find books for folks. Sometimes folks will come in. I don't have it in the store, but I certainly can find it with all the relationships I've made with other dealers, etc. So if they're looking for something special, I can find that too.
Now, one of the descriptions of your store is that you carry modern first editions or modern fiction. How would you classify that genre?
Sure, and I know that definition is sort of a living thing, but I would characterize it as 1900 to present. There are a lot of folks who have introduced a new term, ultra modern, meaning something in the last 25, 30 years. And some folks even take that definition and say the last 10 or 15 years. But for me, I think modern first edition is best characterized as 1900 to present.
How about you, Lee? Where would you put it?
Well, I would have probably put it more like 1950 or so to present. Simply because I have so much stuff that's like 1900 to 1950, and I kind of like to call that vintage or, a little older.
If I could be so daring,
preference.
I would put it as when the majority of the books started getting dust jackets. And
that could be pretty early.
Say I would have said the 1920s. I think F. Scott Fitzgerald probably brought in modern fiction.
Okay. Well, I think all those are reasonable. All those are reasonable terms. Of course, the dust jacket thing, if you've ever seen, say, you probably haven't, Tom Congleton's collection of old dust jackets that go back into the 1800s. Fascinating stuff. Just,
No,
and
I
of course, the
haven't.
original ones were pretty much just paper wrapped around the book, which you see a lot of on decorating shows these days of books that have been wrapped in brown paper or white paper and put on display so you can't see the titles. But but it is an interesting, that's a whole interesting field in itself. It's old dust jackets. But anyway, we're just delighted to find a brick and mortar, fairly new store, because, you know, what's happened is those stores have disappeared. And I'm in a small town myself, maybe not quite as small. I don't know. What's your population?
I think it's about 10 to 15,000.
Okay, well, we're more like 20 or so, I think, 15 to 20. But bookstores selling new books have not made it here. And I think part of it was marketing, that they just didn't know how to get themselves out there. I know that one that we had for a while turned down requests by teachers to order materials for them.
Wow.
Too much trouble. Oh, how much trouble is it? But I would find it very, very difficult. I have a book room that's open by appointment, but I would find doing a full-time books fair extremely frustrating, you know, in this town. So I'm delighted that you're doing it, and I hope it works.
It's not been without some growing pains. Luckily well, they I can't call it a town. They get really upset when York is referred to as a town. In this city, the rent is pretty reasonable. If the rent were much higher, I don't think I'd be able to do it. But the way that I sort of in my mind like to run the shop for now anyway, is that if I can pay for all the costs that it takes to run the shop out of what I sell in the store, and that's, you know, rent, electricity, water, and internet, if I can pay for all that and then have a little extra, you know, I'm okay with that. I do pretty well online. We have an eBay store. We have an Instagram presence as well as a Facebook presence. And that's really where, you know, I sell the higher cost books, but, and that's okay for now. And I say that because I have another full-time job that I'm sort of blessed to be able to work out of the store. If I didn't have that, and I was solely relying on selling books to make my living, I wouldn't be able to operate the store. It just, it wouldn't happen.
Well, we
Sean,
understand that.
Excuse me, Sean, speaking of your online presence, when I checked you out, I noticed on Facebook, I believe it was, I am so jealous. You had a signed first edition of Town and Country by my favorite author, Jack Kerouac, who incidentally signed the book as John, which is the name that he used to have the book published. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Correct. So, and I actually did bring that book, Ed. So here is that copy. And of course, down here, as you can see, it is published under John Kerouac, and he has signed this copy, John Kerouac, which I'm told is actually relatively uncommon for him to have signed the formal John Kerouac.
Uncommon.
Yeah.
So it actually has 2 letters of provenance tracing this book all the way back to its original owner, Kenneth Conrad, who was an interior decorator in the Boston area, but who had passed away. And this book was purchased from the estate by, if you can see here, Falmouth Books. And then after that, I have the letter of provenance to me. It belonged to William Butler of Butler and Sons Books. Mm-hmm. And then I had purchased it from Out of Print Books, who essentially purchased all of Bill's books when Bill stopped selling books. So it's got the 2 letters of provenance. It's got the John Kerouac signature. It's just a really fantastic copy in what I would call at least very good condition. It's not price clipped. And I'll just show you the book here too. The boards are in fairly good shape. It's got a little softening to the spine ends, but in general, this is a really, really nice copy of this book.
Excellent. Good for you.
And something else
What
that's
else are you
interesting.
bringing to the show, Sean?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, guys.
Do you have any other examples of things you'll be bringing to the show?
Can I ask something about, can I make a comment about this one first?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. What's interesting is how many booksellers' hands it's passed through without finding its collector's home yet. And of course, that's possibly what will happen in Florida.
Yeah. And that's why I really like doing
I know.
doing this. Finding it's great when I sell books to other dealers, and I do that quite a bit, but when somebody comes in and it's exactly what they were looking for, and they find that, and you know that that's going to a great home, to a collector who's really going to value that piece, that's kind of why we do this, right, guys? Honestly.
Yeah.
So
I'm a firm believer that everything has its eternal home, and things will gravitate toward it eventually.
I think so. There was actually, just this past weekend, there was a collector based out of Charleston, and he's a really big Cormac McCarthy collector, and I am as well, collector and dealer. Sometimes it's hard to deal the pieces, and Cormac McCarthy is one of those authors where I have a really hard time letting go of some of the very unique pieces that I have. And he had bought an uncorrected proof of Blood Meridian in perfect condition, and it was with me for about 3 months because he's an attorney and he was traveling for a trial in Philadelphia, and he says, "Hey, I want that. Here's the check for it, but can you hang on to it?" And I don't like doing that because, what if something happens to it? But I said, sure, why not? And then he called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in the area." And he came in, and this is the part of the job, again, that I love. We sat here and talked about books for about 3 hours in my shop on Saturday. So that was just wonderful.
Sean, I also noticed that you had a 2-page manuscript letter by Cormac McCarthy.
So that's my next piece I wanted to show you.
Okay.
Well,
hey, this was not rehearsed.
We just had a message from Alan, our producer, saying that dealers are collectors too.
That's true. That's true.
That's true. That's true.
I'm a good example of that too. Like I said, sometimes it is really, and this letter is actually one of those pieces that's going to be really hard to see go. But if it's going to, a good home, that's okay. So this letter is actually pretty special too, because I don't know if you can read that. It'll be tough, but the letter is actually written to Lawrence Millman. Larry Millman was an author, of course, and it's ripped a little bit here, but you can see that McCarthy has signed the return address here. And what's funny,
cool.
I looked up this address. In the letter, he says that he'll be traveling to Knoxville. He lived in El Paso at the time. The letter was written in 1981. And he was going to be traveling to Knoxville for a while. And he gives Millman the address in the letter, but I looked up the address, and that is actually his brother, Dennis. That is Dennis's address. So he came to Knoxville, he stayed with Dennis. But the letter is really neat as well in its own right. It is 2 pages. It looks like unlined notebook paper, and he signs in the familiar Cormac at the end. And it's pretty neat because he's actually offering to intercede on Millman's behalf with Random House in what he says his limited capacity. Millman's trying to get a book published at this point. And another interesting thing about the letter, if you can read right in the middle there, he says, "I also want to know about Mrs. Dillard." And of course, Mrs. Dillard is referring to Annie Dillard. And Annie Dillard would go on to write the dust jacket praise on one of Millman's books. So although it doesn't say Annie Dillard in here, I'm assuming it's Annie Dillard. I guess there could be another Mrs. Dillard out there, but based on that and the fact that she wrote the praise on Millman's book, I think it's probably her. So it's just a really nice letter in really good condition. You can tell that they had corresponded back and forth quite a bit. Just the friendly tone of the letter. Just a really great piece. And I can tell you this, these letters, the Cormac letters, are really tough to track down. I've been looking for one for about 3 years now, and this one came available, and I kind of you know how we do sometimes. I opened the checkbook.
Treated yourselves to it.
Yeah.
To acquire. So
Got yourself a little early Christmas present, huh?
I think so.
Yes, and Larry and Cormac had no idea that this letter was 30 years later going to the Florida Book Fair.
That's correct. It's really, and of course, this is pre-Blood Meridian, right? So we read in some of Cormac's early letters that he didn't even see a royalty payment until, of course, he switched publishers to go to Knopf, and Sonny Mehta helped him publish All the Pretty Horses, and the rest is history. But he sold, I think a little over 5,000 copies of those first 5 novels in total, which is insane to me. Orchard Keeper was the only book of those first 5 that had a second printing ordered, and that was probably on the strength of the Penn Faulkner Award. And it's just, I mean, it's incredible that that the history of Cormac and his first 5 books versus the rest of his career with Knopf.
Now, one of the things that we do as book dealers and book collectors is we become attracted to local authors. And of course, a great local author from South Carolina is Pat Conroy. Do you have any Conroy material?
So we did. That goes, as you can imagine, pretty quickly in the store. At one point, I had a signed first edition of The Boo. That one went pretty quick. I've had some signed Prince of Tides come and go pretty quickly as well. So people do come in and still ask for Conroy, and they ask for James Dickey as well, because Dickey taught it for years, and we've sold quite a few copies of Deliverance in here. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And Southern,
you're a master of that. Lee, you're wonderful at picking up local authors.
When my husband was in grad school at Carolina, he was stuck in an elevator. Dickey was a writer in residence at that time, and we're talking about the early 70s. And they had an elevator malfunction and stuck in the elevator with James Dickey for about an hour or so. Nothing really came out of it, but it was an interesting experience. But while we were there, writers such as Alan Tate came, did readings, signed, things, and we were not in the book business then, but he was an English major, so of course he went to everything that was available. But here in Georgia, of course, we have Flannery O'Connor, Carson McCullers, and collected Flannery O'Connor for years personally. And then we decided about 5 years ago to start selling the collection. And that took 2 book fairs. And I still have a couple of copies of Wise Blood, but none of them that are signed. But I do have a copy of her college yearbook. Not her copy, but a copy. And in it, she did woodcut illustrations for the sections of the book, like the clubs and athletic teams and things like this. And it's a fascinating, and I don't know why it's never sold, because it's just an amazing piece.
Very unique.
And so she wasn't really local, but certainly very popular in our area. We have local writers, and we do as you do. We have signings at the Art Center and the History Center, things like that. I'm in a book club. We've had local writers, some better known than others, to come and talk to it. And our library does events with Georgia writers, every year. So, yeah, having local is fun.
Speaking of book fairs, Sean, you're going to be at the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair March 1st through March 3rd as is Lee. Lee, what's the location of that again?
Coliseum in St. Petersburg.
Coliseum
is
in
a
St. Petersburg, March 1 through 3.
1920s dance hall. Gorgeous building, Moroccan, and I mean the Spanish, looking on the outside. Lots of wood, alcoves along each side, which are very sought after. They're dealers who've been on the waiting list for an alcove for years and years and years. It's a lovely fair. It's beautifully run. Sarah Smith, who's the manager, grew up in the business. Her father is Mike Slicker of Lighthouse Books. And Sarah took it over when Larry Kellogg, who had been doing it for years, retired several years ago. And now her children are growing up at the fair. So it's really been a family affair for that family. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Now, Sean, as a first-time exhibitor, do you have any reservations or expectations?
I tried to be free of both. One of my, I guess you could call him a mentor in the rare book business, a fellow by the name of Brian Young. He and his wife, Kelly, run Gray Shelf Books in Tomball, Texas. And he calls me one day and he says, hey, you've got all this great stuff. Why don't you go and exhibit at the Florida Book Fair? And this was actually last year. And I said, I don't think I can this year. So I missed last year. And then he calls again and he says, look, dude, no excuses. Let's do it. Why don't you call Sarah and tell her, hey, I'd like to be, next to Brian and Kelly and see what she can do. And dude, you should just do it. Just take the plunge, do it. It's your first show. You should do it. It's a great first book fair. It's a great first fair, he says. And so that's the way it came about. And so I guess my biggest fear, and it's not even really a fear, is that I get down there and don't sell anything. But let's theoretically say that happens. It means nothing because I've made, additional friendships and additional content in the industry. So there is really nothing to have a reservation about. Plus, I get to hang out in Florida for a few days. So I took the day before and the Monday after off. So it's like a mini vacation. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, you probably won't.
And fairs are for buying as well as selling.
That is correct. And he's telling me that. He says, "Hey, make sure you're, especially on Sunday that you're looking, because there's dealers that are gonna, have great books, and this might be a good place to stop.
I want to carry them home."
That's correct.
Plus, there's a lovely reception on Saturday night for the dealers, and so it's an opportunity to drink a little bit too. I went to a workshop one time, and the presenter about book fairs said that you go for 3 reasons. You go to sell books, of course, but you also go to buy books, and you go to drink if you can't sell or buy either one. So expect to have a nice weekend. And people turn out.
Isn't it wonderful that we all have people in this business that we can call mentors? That's one thing about the book business, that everybody is so collegial. Nobody feels threatened by other booksellers, and everybody is willing to step forward and help out a new entrant into the business.
Yeah. And sometimes another dealer will come to you and say, I just saw this book. It's not something I normally deal with, but it's right up your alley. You ought to go take a look at it. Or they have bought a book and they think, and when they bought it, they thought of you.
Correct.
Everything. Major deal, that kind of thing. And they take care of each other. I am a testament to that. That the reason that I was as well taken care of in Boston was partly as a result of efforts by other booksellers who saw that I got to the right hospital, who accompanied me to the emergency room, who checked up on me daily. It's a great community. And it'll be nice for you to put faces to a lot of names that you've probably seen or dealt with.
Yep, it's true. And a lot of the relationships have been largely just through Instagram or through Facebook, or we've never, shaken hands. So it'll be nice to do that. But as I was saying, Lee, everything that you just said, like that has happened to me in this journey as, you know, a pretty early book dealer. I've had other book dealers reach out and say, hey, check this book out. I don't want it, but I think this is, and a lot of times it's Cormac McCarthy, right? I don't want this. I've already got one, or I can't use this. I know you can probably. I've had dealers say, hey, I've had this on my shelf for a year. What do you think of, will you trade me this? And we all just work with each other. And I do the same thing. If there's something I already have, you know, I will take a listing and actually, you know, do the research myself, send it to some of my friends, and, you know, they may or may not buy it, but you know, I'm reaching out, I'm letting them know, hey, I'm thinking of you, etc. So I've had probably 3 really great mentors in the, you know, in the short span that I've been doing this.
The first book fair I ever
This is
participated
a great
in.
business. Sean, before we bid you fare thee well, are there any other items on your desk before you that you had hoped to share with the community today?
Sure. So this one,
it looks like you've got a problem there.
So no, I didn't know Lee was going to be on from Georgia. So this is a really cool connection, Georgia, Florida. So this is Harry Crew's first novel, The Gospel Singer. And this copy is signed by Crews. And let's see, that's a really neat copy. And this one, I don't know why I've had it for so long. This is a first printing of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And this one is signed by Kesey, imploring John to sell this book in 1986. But the cool part about this one is that it comes with these little pieces of provenance where the book was signed. Kesey did this little, when he released Demon Box, Kesey did this little night of performance. And so it's got these, you know, these who's going to be performing what, and it's mostly like members of his family that are just playing music and doing skits. And so it has the program and the ticket stub for that event. So I thought that was a pretty neat addition to the signed book. Yeah. And lastly, I've got a first issue, because there was 2 issues of this. This is E.E. Cummings' first novel, The Enormous Room. This copy I bought from John Bale Books, the ABAA accredited dealer in Waterbury, Connecticut. And he tells me he bought this from John Laughlin's estate. So this was Laughlin's copy of The Enormous Room, and it is signed by Cummings. And I'm told that that is a very rare item to have signed.
Well, it looks like you're in good shape.
Sean, I have a feeling that in a couple of years, you're going to be a full-time bookseller, and being a lawyer is going to be your side hustle.
I hope so.
You've got some great material there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I like the looks of that Bukowski that you had on Facebook too.
You know what? It happens to be right at my feet.
Of course it is.
Wasn't even planning on showing this, but yes. Yeah. Crucifix in a Deathbed. There were 3,100 copies of this, and this particular one, the prior owner had a very special clamshell bookcase made of this, so pretty neat.
Oh, Ed, you could do that now, can't you?
Yeah, I'm hoping to. I'm hoping to.
Ed just completed.
All right, Sean, thanks for joining us today for the.
I was just saying that you had just completed an apprenticeship in bookbinding.
Yeah, I'm hoping to add that skill to my book repertoire.
Wow. Well, maybe you and I could have some conversations, Ed, because I've got, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 pieces that I'd like to have cases made, not the least of which is definitely this one. Oh, I forgot. I've got one more. Sorry, Ed, one more. So this is a review copy of Jim Harrison's Wolf. And this copy is signed by Harrison as well. I just noticed too, I didn't even do this on purpose. I've got a first novel theme going on here. Wolf, Cuckoo's Nest, Gospel Singer, The Enormous Room, and The Town in the City. I didn't even realize that, but.
Good
Well,
job. Congratulations.
you might exhibit them as such.
I thought about that.
You know, that sometimes is a way to get people to stop by your booth. You know, who, if they were scattered around or just put on the shelf as novels, that they wouldn't. So that might be.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and I really look forward to Florida. Lee, I'm looking
And
forward
I
to
will
meeting.
see you on the 1st. Yes.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
And thank you for joining us, Sean Lynch of Books for You. That's EWE, Books for You in York, South Carolina. Good luck on your first book fair, the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, March 1 through 3rd in St. Petersburg, Florida. Always a pleasure, Lee.
Yes, it is.
Hey, Lee, our next show is going to be show 41, and 41 is a prime number.
Well, so it is. Does that
It's
mean
going to be a
anything?
good one. I have a feeling.
In your book ecosystem, does that mean anything?
No, but prime numbers are always very fortuitous.
That's true. So it should be a good show. It should be.
All right. Thanks again, folks. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, where else? Everywhere
Instagram.
podcasts are Instagram, and everywhere podcasts are given away for free. Thanks for joining us. The Rare Book Cafe, the Coffee Break Edition. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hey, guys.